Welcome to Pensare Basketball's Mailbag Edition. My name is Robert, and today we're going to dig into 21 questions that you had about the Toronto Raptors, about the NBA, about analytics, and everything in between. First, I want to say thank you to every single person who has helped build this community up over the last year. We officially turned a year old 2 days ago, and to anyone who has commented, liked, subscribed, sent a super thanks, thank you so much. It has meant the world to me to be able to do this. I am really proud of where the videos started and where they've come. I think we've gotten a lot better, but if I'm being completely honest, the thing that I'm most proud of is to find a community of like-minded and sometimes not like-minded Raptor fans to have honest, open discussions about the sport that I love so much. So thank you so much for that. If you like thoughtful basketball content, please make sure to hit subscribe. It really does go a long way. And if you have a question for our next Mailbag Edition, leave it in the comments below. As always, grab your coffee. Let's get to it. Our first question comes from Out in Limbo. Preseason, everyone was hoping we would meet the Cavs round one, probably in a 4-5 matchup. Assuming all things go well and based on small sample size thus far, the Hawks have to be the team we want to match up with now, right? Great videos as always. Thank you, Out in Limbo. Honestly, if you're asking me to choose between the Cavs and the Hawks, they are pretty similar teams with a big difference in the middle. Dynamic guards like Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, I think that could be a really big problem for the Raptors backcourt. But Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell scare me a hell of a lot more than those two do, especially with Donovan Mitchell's proven track record in the playoffs as a mega scorer. And Evan Mobley and Jared Allen is just a lot to deal with. So if there was ever going to be a series where Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam were just going to hit a wall offensively, it would probably be against the Cavs. So I would love to avoid the Cavs at all costs. And if there's another team that I would probably like to avoid, it's probably the Celtics and the Bucks. So if we could avoid those three teams in the playoffs, I like our chances. Mika May asks, what does your coffee mug say? You always have your hand over it. The travel mug. That's funny. It says OCD, obsessive chest disorder. James Welsh asks, what do you think the Raptors need to add to get to the next level? Naturally, a superstar would help, but what about smaller fixes needed? The Raptors are in a strange place because they do have a ton of players on this team, like Christian Koloko, Delano Banton, Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa. Would Precious Achiuwa becoming a consistent knockdown three-point shooter as he was last year and being able to handle and sort of play point forward, which is sort of the trajectory that they were trying to build him up into, would that help? Because he gets into the paint at will. In terms of a player type that I would really like the Raptors to target, a guard who can finish in the paint, shoot, and create well for others. A player who kind of fits into that mold, apart from, excellent shooting, is DeJounte Murray. I think that would have been just an awesome target for the Raptors had they been able to swing a deal for him. Barring that, I think a lesser version of what DeJounte Murray does would be just great off the bench. Kai Mayo asks, do you think Victor Wembanyama is worth tanking for? Short answer, yes, I do. Some people have expressed concerns over his potential injury issues because he's so tall. I just think because he moves differently than other guys who have been his height, that you cannot use height as a automatic determining factor to say, well, this guy's definitely going to be injury prone. I think one of the biggest parts, and I'm not a doctor, but one of the biggest parts of injuries for taller guys is just the weight, right? So as long as he doesn't bulk up to like 300 pounds, which I don't even think based on his body type he can, I think he'll be fine. Now, in terms of the second part of it, so would I tank for that guy? Honestly, it depends. If I'm the Raptors, I think I could go either way. You're not bad enough to tank. You would have to shut down Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam to be bad enough to be having a serious, legitimate shot at, those two players. It would be very difficult to convince three players, all of whom are potentially going to be eligible for contract extensions this summer, that it's going to be good for their long-term interest to tank. The Raptors cannot tank right now unless, unfortunately, they suffer a slew of injuries, which, honestly, they already have, or if they trade like 3 core pieces. If you do all of this to then somehow end up with a top 2 pick and you end up at 4, well, that's a pretty big matzo ball to have given up an all-NBA player, an all-star, and a potential, all-NBA first defender. Because I'm telling you right now, if you have the existing team plus any one of OG, Fred, and Pascal, you are not going to be bad enough to get Victor Wembanyama. So Joseph Palumbo asks, not sure if the Raptors need to trade for a playoff missing piece. What do you think? What do you think they need for the playoffs? Name 3 players that should be available and would help us this playoffs. Thanks, Professor Robert. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of 3 players. I don't think Jonathan Isaac for the Orlando Magic. He hasn't played in a while, but when he was playing, man, I can't tell you. He's one of my favorite players in the NBA. He would probably be your best defender if he's healthy, right? And he's a really good dude. Second, Jakob Poeltl, man. Like, I think the Spurs are going to suck this year again. I know that they're not necessarily tanking, but I think he's a really good player. And as much as I really do believe in the long-term potential of Christian Koloko, and I think the Khem Birch experiment just has not worked. If you could just shelve the Christian Koloko minutes for now and just, if you're really serious about contending in the playoffs, and that's where the Raptors feel their roster is going with, Pascal Siakam taking a step, and if Scottie Barnes can get back on track, OG Anunoby, these are a lot of guys that are sort of in their prime or approaching their prime, or at least capable of, really being competitive in the playoffs. And I don't necessarily know if Christian Koloko is going to be anywhere near the player this year that Jakob Poeltl could be for this unit. So, and again, it's 2 non-shooters on a team with a whole bunch of non-shooters, so that might be a problem. But in terms of just defensive impact and identity, I think those 2 are 2 of the best defenders in the NBA. And, at some point, the Raptors' defense and their offense are so linked, right? They get offense off their defense. So having a guy like Isaac back there, it's just, they both just shut down the paint completely. So what we saw Christian Koloko do against the Chicago Bulls with his 6 blocks, that's routine for those guys. That's the type of paint protection they provide. And I think that just really sparks the Raptors. It puts them in transition. And in the case of Isaac, he's a solid athlete too. And again, provided he's healthy, that could be interesting. Slamajama asks, is the media in Toronto capable of talking basketball without spinning narratives? I cringe so much when I see the takes out there that I idolize rather than evaluate. That's a fair question. Look, I don't think that every single person does that, to be honest. I think there are some very responsible Toronto media members, and then there are some very irresponsible Toronto media members. I think Blake Murphy's cool. There's some stuff that Will Liu has done in the past that's been kind of cool, right? I don't know. I mean, does anyone listen to Doug Smith anymore? Do people read? Do people, I haven't met a single person in the last 10 years that I would take seriously on basketball that really listens to Doug Smith. If Doug Smith did a podcast, and this is not really disrespect to Doug Smith, if he did videos on YouTube every single day, right, they would underperform these videos. I guarantee you. So in terms of the actual reach that these guys have, in terms of influencing narratives on the sport, I think most people have just tuned them out. I think the rise of content creators on YouTube, on Spotify, etc., has just replaced a lot of the old guard. I think in order to talk about basketball without the he's a bust, he's not a bust, he's a scrub, he didn't work hard, without the sensationalism, without the scandal, I think you actually have to understand the sport. And I think it's very rare that a beat writer or someone someone who covers the sport for a newspaper, it's very rare that that person has either played the sport or deeply, deeply studied the sport. A lot of people who deeply study the sport end up in very different vocations within basketball, whether they be GMs, coaches, scouts, analysts, etc. So these beat writers, I think they're just sort of sensationalizing things and trying to make them digestible for common fans. But again, non-common fans, deeper fans of basketball and the type of content that you're probably after and the type of content you'd like them to create, I don't necessarily think that's their audience. And the people for whom that type of content is relevant, I think that those people are gravitating more and more towards the ringer, the volume, small creators like myself, and thinking basketball podcasts. Like, there's so much out there right now, right? So I don't think we need to worry about these people. I think, within 10 years, they'll probably be extinct. Okay, I'm very sorry if I am butchering this pronunciation. Okay, Etta Fiago says, do you think a coach like Ime Udoka would give the team a different look? I love Nick Nurse, but sometimes I question him. I mean, who doesn't, right? I mean, anytime you follow a coach and there's a coach on the other team, it's very easy to just say, well, that other coach is just so much better, and the coach that you're watching every day makes so many mistakes. But the truth is that the grass is not always greener on the other side. As someone who sat through Sam Mitchell, Dwayne Casey, Jay Triano, Nick Nurse is a breath of fresh air. He's a highly analytical mind. I know that Raptor fans are often critical of his reluctance to use the bench and all sorts of stuff like that. Look, I understand why people feel like, oh my God, 38 minutes versus 35 minutes. Like, if he just played the guy 35 minutes, he wouldn't get injured. But I don't think there's a lot of science to back up that claim. If I had a dime for every single time Nick Nurse has been asked a question about 38 minutes or 39 minutes for one of his starters, I would have a lot of money. I think Nick Nurse is a really creative person, and I hold that attribute in high regard. I think he's extremely intelligent. I think he's flexible. I think he's adaptable. I think he's someone who learns constantly. I like those qualities in a coach, right? I think Ime Udoka is a fantastic coach, right? Scandal notwithstanding, I actually had a chance to meet Ime Udoka in 2008, 2009. Looks so different back then. And I just gathered from very briefly talking to him that he was just an extremely smart person. And I know that he and Masai Ujiri have a connection. And, if God forbid something were to happen with Nick Nurse in Toronto, Ime Udoka probably is someone that they would look at. But with the scandal, with everything that's happened, I think that given how reluctant MLSE and specifically this particular regime has been to touch players who have scandalous histories, and whatever the reason for the scandal, whatever happened, it's not a team that gambles on scandals. If for whatever reason the Nick Nurse thing doesn't work out in Toronto, I wouldn't be upset if Ime Udoka was his replacement. He's one of my favorite coaches in the NBA. But to the specific question of would I fire Nick Nurse just to hire Ime Udoka? No, I wouldn't. Do you agree with Vince Carter that Pascal's on his way or now a top 5 player? I don't know if this is a troll question, but no, I do not agree with that at all. I don't see the pathway to it. I've been on record for many weeks now, probably a few months now, saying that I don't see that happening. I think Pascal's playing really well this year. For all of my gripes with what I perceive to be stat chasing and all that stuff, I think he's been really good. And, kudos to him for all the skill development that he has done. But top 5, I think you really do have to acknowledge that there are guys currently, right now, that are just on a different stratosphere. From Joel Embiid to Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, right? Giannis Antetokounmpo. You really have to be the 5th guy in that bunch. And that's tough because there's a lot of really great players vying for that 5th position, most of whom, by the way, are younger than Pascal Siakam. So I don't see it. But you know what? Not where I was a month ago, but I could see top 12, top 15. A month ago, I was solidly in he's going to be top 20, 25. But, there's been a lot of improvements offensively as a passer, etc. His court vision has gotten a lot better. His rebounding has gotten better. If he can come in and deliver the type of defensive impact that he had in the bubble while continuing to deliver the type of offensive impact that he has this season, and he can just be that complete two-way incredible asset for your team, yeah, I could see him being a top 12 player. But top 5 is absolutely, I don't think so. Flavius Films asks, looking forward to the future, do you see a lineup of Scottie, Gary, OG, Koloko, and Precious could one day win us a title, obviously with the right development over time? No, I don't. Largely because I don't. I understand and appreciate where you're coming from on that, right? Like those are 3, 4, 5 very young players. Like OG is the oldest, right? So I'm not a clairvoyant. I don't want to pretend that I know what Precious is going to become or Koloko is going to become. If you follow this channel, you know that I'm very high on both players. And in fact, apart from Gary Trent Jr., every single player that you just mentioned is a player that I'm extremely high on. But do I think that's a starting lineup? No, I don't. You add that obviously with the right development over time. Within 3 years, no. Within 5 years, who knows? The only part of this equation that's giving me trepidations is Gary Trent Jr. in there. Replace Gary Trent Jr. with like a really good, creative, paint finishing, passing, shooting, two-way guy. Great, yes. Then yes. If Gary Trent Jr. could be replaced with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, so Scottie, Shai, OG, Koloko, and Precious, and like we're talking 4 years down the line and everything hit in terms of Precious and Koloko's development, then yes, that could be a championship core. But I hope I don't need to tell you that there is a very big difference right now between Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Gary Trent Jr. And I do think that is the level of upgrade that this type of lineup would need in order to have just enough creativity, shooting, scoring, paint finishing, isolation scoring, etc., to compensate for the fact that I don't know how much of that you're going to get from the rest of these guys. Alistair49 asks, does Scottie's triple-double prove your point how he can average similar or same numbers as Siakam if he was the number one? No and yes, right? Because triple-doubles are a function of quite a few things. Number one, the NBA did not have a ton of jumbo creators, before. And with the way that centers are being phased out of the league, it's very often you're finding guards, more threes, longer rebounds, etc. There have just never been, I don't think Michael Jordan really even though he definitely could have averaged a triple-double, and I think he almost did, I think it was a lot harder back when Jordan played. Pace goes a huge way, right? Steve Nash's assist numbers are greatly influenced by the pace that the Suns played at. And you cannot just take those numbers out of vacuums. So, long story short, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if Scottie Barnes really put his mind to getting triple-doubles every second game, he could definitely do it. Like, if he wanted to chase triple-doubles like Russell Westbrook did, or Ricky Davis did in that, that one infamous game, he could absolutely do it. You just have to dominate the ball. He's a better passer than Pascal Siakam, like by far, right? He's just as good a rebounder, in my opinion, as Siakam. So that's already two of your components. Chun Chan asks, how come Ujiri could use a first-round pick to trade for Thaddeus Young and still could use San Antonio's second pick to get Koloko so amazing? That is because the San Antonio Spurs traded their second-round pick in exchange for our first-round pick. So that was part of the deal. So we gave up a first-round pick. We basically swapped it for the seconds. Now, of course, at the time of the trade, there were some fears that, well, what if the Raptors end up with like the 16th pick? Now you've moved down almost 20 spots. So, it was a gamble, but I think if you're the Raptors, it's okay, right? Thaddeus Young has been a very valuable contributor to the team, and Christian Koloko is a really good find at 33. Another Flavius Films, Watanabe is getting tons of minutes on the Nets, and he's not looking too bad. Do you sometimes feel like the Raptors give up on players too soon, or maybe don't give them enough minutes? I can foresee Malachi also falling victim to this. Interestingly enough, I also think that Malachi Flynn is due for a change of scenery and probably would thrive in a different situation. It's very difficult to say, well, for instance, the Minnesota Timberwolves should have absolutely selected Steph Curry. But you don't know if you select Steph Curry, that Steph Curry becomes Steph Curry as a Timberwolf. You don't know that. Or 30-something teams pass on Nikola Jokic and they're absolute idiots because there's an MVP sitting in the second round. But you don't know if he becomes an MVP anywhere else. I know firsthand how much effort that staff put into unleashing his talents, not only making him feel comfortable, but going to Serbia, just meeting his family, getting to know him. And you don't know if there's another situation out there where he gets cut and is in the G League or something. Like, you don't know that. Development is a funny thing, and, you know, I don't necessarily think Yuta Watanabe is someone that you need to cry over. The reason that I wanted him back was he was just such a good friend of Scottie Barnes, and he was just a really positive guy to have. It seemed like he was a very positive guy to have on your team. So Dom Mizzle asks, do you think Malachi should play more minutes? No, I think Jeff Doughton Jr. should play more minutes.
Logical Raptor fanatic. Mailbag question. In your amazing statistics, knowledge base, and IQ, have you seen a best fit, sized, and rolled properly, of course, but player type? And in an example format, who's your favorite point guard style, and then maybe the one you think is best statistically that you know of? I'm not asking to go 100 researching, but in general, I'd love to have your opinion on those point guards in an all-time sense, any era. Love the content. Been there since day one. Raptor fan. I just found your channel.
I think what you're asking here is, what is my favorite point guard style? And if there is an example of a player like that in the NBA. Well, I'll tell you what I don't like, and then hopefully by telling you what I don't like, I can get to what I like. I don't like completely trigger happy guards who don't make anyone else better. And I also don't like those dribble, pound guys who just, you know, just probe until they can get an assist, kind of like Jose Calderon. I don't like super small point guards either, because I do think positional versatility is a thing, and my prototypical point guard would be around 6'4", 6'5", could get into the paint, collapse the defense, pass really well, score reasonably, and shoot pretty well. TMS Charles asks, who are your top 5 best NBA players of all time? Top 5 all time. Jordan, of course. LeBron, Bill Russell. For 4 and 5, it gets really tough for me. Right? I'm not someone who believes that Kobe Bryant should be in that conversation. I'd go with Tim Duncan. I'd go with Tim Duncan for 4 and, 5. It's probably between Bird and Magic. It's funny how those two are just consistently going to be tied together forever and ever. But if we have this exact conversation in 5 years, I'm pretty sure I'm going to put Giannis. I'm just gonna get over the Bird and Magic debate by just bypassing it and just pretending it's 2027, and I can say this with a straight face, but like a lot of people would be able to put Shaq on that list, right? And I just think that based on what he is going to do, at least what is expected to do and what he can do, and I believe what he will do, I just think that he's going to have a better career than Shaq. I think he's going to play more games. I think he's, touch wood. I mean, I'm a Raptor fan, yeah, but I'm an NBA fan too, and rooting for Giannis is definitely something that I will always do. Mailbag, are you in favor of trading for KD? Hell fucking yes, I am. There are very few players on this team that I would not trade in a heartbeat to get Kevin Durant. I think he's just incredible. I think he's got a lot of time left, and I just think he's the type of person that you win with, man. Seriously. Mikey J asks, do you think the Raptors could have won if they'd kept DeMar instead of Kawhi? They'd have kept Jakob Poeltl too and not have had to give up a pick. No, I don't. DeMar was not nearly the player that he became later on, and I don't necessarily think that you would have been able to time it correctly with Kyle's peak. DeMar left, obviously became a much better passer. That was a bit of a weakness in his game while he was here, and he became a more efficient scorer. It was interesting to see that true shooting percentage just dip up. And, when he went to San Antonio and now in Chicago, it's fairly regular to see DeMar in that 59 to 62 range in terms of true shooting percentage. That's not where he was as a Toronto Raptor. As a Toronto Raptor, he was kind of where Pascal Siakam is right now, 54, 56, 57. And I just think that where Kawhi was in terms of efficiency, the fact that Kawhi could just lock down when he just got motivated, like what he did with Giannis. I mean, if Kawhi doesn't do that, I don't think you get past the Bucks. Right, so everybody wants to talk about, what Fred VanVleet did in the playoffs against Steph Curry. But I don't think you get to Steph Curry without Kawhi and Gasol pulling off like historic performances, locking up superstars. He didn't do it himself, but as a primary defender, he did put up a really good effort against Giannis. So I would really be interested to rewatch those games and see how I felt about that. If I'm being honest, I was actually a little upset when we traded him because I felt the way he felt. Like I felt his pain when I saw his IG story. I felt like, oh my God, like how'd you do this guy so dirty, But I calmed down the second I found out that it was for Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, both of whom I think were incredible. So DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, you give up a lot of youth for guys who frankly are either over the hill and or not sticking around. But I think one of the more underrated parts of that deal was I'm not sure the Raptors wanted to keep DeMar at the price that they have him. And this was just a shot to get a true top 5 player in the NBA. And for everything DeMar has been in his career, I don't think a top 5 player is one of those things. Jason asks, if you could start a team with Victor Wembanyama or Scottie Barnes, who do you choose? Good question. I choose Victor Wembanyama because I know that I could trade Victor Wembanyama for Scottie Barnes in like 7 first-round picks. Wow, that was a good answer. I love Scottie. I honestly, I think if you start a team with Scottie Barnes, that would be a good team. It would be a good team for the next 15 years. I felt this way about Tim Duncan. I felt this way about Kevin Durant, even though he didn't stick around in OKC. And, I feel this way about Scottie Barnes. I think he's just a culture driver. I don't know Victor Wembanyama that well at all, but I do know that NBA GMs would value him higher than Scottie. And for that reason alone, I would start a team with him. And then, I'd probably trade him for Scottie in like 6 first-round picks and assets. Marie asks, why could Kyle finish under the basket but Fred can't? They're the same height. I tell you this as someone who played basketball against a guy one time who had a really big ass. Kyle's body type is just really hard to stop. He's a pinball. He's so strong. He's just learned to shift his weight around. I've gotten into this in several videos about space creation, right? Like, how do you create space vertically? If you had really long arms, that's extra space. If you're really quick, that's extra space. Kyle had extra girth, and that's not something that Fred VanVleet really has. So Fred has his advantages, but physically Kyle was a specimen in terms of an athlete. And while we often assume that athleticism is just about running really fast or jumping really high, I think athleticism has a lot to do with the functional stuff too. You see Kawhi's shoulders, or with Luka's sort of like base strength, right? These guys create space the same way Kyle created space, which is just through width. And I think that's a really big reason. And I also think Kyle's hella crafty, and as an undersized guard coming into the NBA, I think he developed a package of floaters and contortions and just the physical ability to take a hit and not be completely pushed off your trajectory is very important. Liz asks, if you could trade Pascal Siakam for Jason Tatum, would you do it? I mean, Liz, do you know me? Of course I would. I would do it in a heartbeat. Keenan asks, is it possible for a player to be way better or worse than their analytics? Can you think of any examples? Also, analytics or eye test? Is it possible for a player to be better or worse than their analytics? Yes, it is definitely possible. Can you think of any examples? Probably Andre Drummond. I think Hassan Whiteside. I think people who don't really study analytics tend to brush it all into like one category, right? There's a lot of divided opinions among the analytics community about which numbers mean what, right? And like, how much is a rebound worth relative to an assist, right? How much is a point worth relative to a block? That's the whole point of this. Like, you're trying to create some sort of metric of evaluation where I can say, I'm not trading X player because he's a 27 for your player because he's a 25. Obviously, this is like almost like a reverse engineering. You're trying to create 2K ratings, that make actual sense. And 2K is just a popularity contest. Analytics or eye test? Obviously, both. Analytics provide context for what you're seeing on the court. And I don't think analytics are perfect, but they're a good check and balance against what you're seeing. You might see a player really digging into the ball, like really getting up and being aggressive and hustling a lot and moving his feet, and there's a lot of like energy being exerted on the defensive end. But then you start to really test it over, a 7-8 game sample size, and you realize, man, this guy is giving up like crazy number of blow-bys despite his effort and intensity. So in this case, your eye test might lie to you. Similarly, you might have a player within a team concept in a particular lineup. That player is really, really beasting defensively. The analytics show that person is just an incredible defender, but then you watch them and you're like, my God, it's just a role. It's a role on defense that they're playing. And if you took them outside that role with those specific 4 players that they always share the court with, they would probably be terrible defensively. So I think you have to do both, personally. Anyways, that has been 21 questions, and holy crap, we are at 40 plus minutes. This is going to need some massive editing, but thank you so much to every single person who asked questions. I do regret to say this is almost 4 a.m. right now, so I hope that this was entertaining and engaging. If you like thoughtful, insightful basketball content, make sure to check out the other videos on this channel. It has really been fun creating videos that I'm proud of. If you are interested in video breakdowns like Scottie Barnes, Christian Koloko, I did a couple of those. There's a really cool doc. It's called 10 Myths About the NBA, which gets into a lot of the stuff that I touched on in this Q&A. Thanks for 1 year, guys. I really do appreciate it. I know that it's hard to gauge sincerity because I have like 25, 30 takes of this, and I can do this like multiple times so that I can sound sincere, but I really do sincerely want to say that I am humbled by the people that are commenting. Sometimes when someone will comment like 10, 15 times, like I will actually Google who the hell they are. I'll see what they're doing, and it's just like, whoa, I can't believe that this person is thinking enough to watch anything that I have to say. That's so cool. So I'm humbled by the support, guys. I look forward to year 2. I promise I'm gonna do my best to build this community up, make these videos better, get better at this. I've been learning a lot, and it's been fun. So talk to you later. If you haven't hit subscribe. And again, if you have a question for the next mailbag episode, be sure to leave it below, and I will get to that mailbag hopefully sometime in December. Talk to you later. Peace.